The Milwaukee Bucks reportedly have some serious interest in Suns forward Jae Crowder. On today's episode of Locked On Suns, we'll talk about why a Milwaukee-Phoenix deal is a little bit tricky, plus two key trends coming off of the Suns' big win in the preseason over the Los Angeles Lakers.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 6 seasons and a writer at Suns.com and Dime Magazine. Thank you all for making Locked On Suns your first listen to finish out your week. Basketball is back. 2 preseason games, a ton to talk about, lots still going on, big picture, trades, team sale, all of it. You do not want to miss a single show. So if you're finding us for the first time, hit follow, hit subscribe, get our show in your feed every day. If you're on YouTube, drop me a comment telling me what you think makes the most sense between a Bucks and Suns Jae Crowder trade. I want to hear your ideas. And if you've already subscribed, hit that bell down below. Make sure you get notified every time a new episode pops up. You don't always hear, you don't always see. I know you're busy. I don't want you to miss a thing because we are here for you every single day. Today's show, guys, brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. More from them later on in the show. Let's get to it. Jae Crowder, we know, is on the block, right? He's not coming back to this team. I saw some people who looked at the Cameron Johnson finger sprain, thumb sprain in preseason in the Lakers game that we're going to talk about later on and said, hey, just give Crowder the extension he wants and bring him back. I think that ship has sailed. Zach Lowe reported today in his annual tiers column where he breaks down all of the teams in the NBA or all of the contending teams of where they are. Well, no, it's every team, including the tankers. He just has them down in their own category with not a lot of analysis in it. But that the Bucks and the Heat both have interest in Crowder. We knew both of those teams in the past, but look, when Zach Lowe reports it, it brings a little bit more substance to it that it didn't have before. And I think the Bucks especially, because they were kind of a team where it's like, we know that they need something. We know they have some pieces to make a deal, but what exactly are they looking for? This feels pretty concrete. He also put in there something about that same idea of like, oh, they might ask Crowder to come back in a bench role. It's like, I think they kind of already did that. And I think that's why the falling out has happened. So I think that's wishful thinking. If you're a Suns fan or if you're anybody looking at this from the outside and thinking, they could just make up. Yeah, I don't think you post a farewell tribute video to yourself on your own Instagram and Twitter accounts as an athlete if you plan on coming back in a month. So I don't think that's happening. I think a trade is the most likely. We've talked plenty about the Miami Heat. Duncan Robinson. There's some possibilities if you wait a little bit when guys like Victor Oladipo or Cody Martin become available. Caleb Martin, one of the Martin twins, the one who's a 3-and-D player, he makes the right amount of money for that trade to happen, but it doesn't feel like right now the Miami Heat have something to do here. So let's talk about Milwaukee. It's clear why they want Crowder, right? They don't have a switchable wing to make their defensive versatility really work, right? They lost PJ Tucker 2 years ago now. I think Pat Connaughton is very clearly a good piece for them. They have Giannis, who's versatile. They have Drew, who's versatile. Chris Middleton, who's versatile. Even Bobby Portis, I think. And so they have this identity. That's what they used to beat the Suns, is the ability to, they can go big, they can go small, they can play Giannis at center, but they're missing that sort of turnkey piece, that last guy to make it all work ever since they haven't had Tucker. So Crowder could be that. He's not going to play center the same way that Tucker did, but he can play a forward spot. Giannis can be the man in the middle and they can switch or they can, play super aggressively, whatever you want to do. Crowder can execute all of that. So how would a trade look? I think you go down, right? I'm going to go kind of down from like best players down. So first, if I'm the Suns, I'm looking at Brook Lopez, right? I don't think he is somebody you would play next to Ayton a whole lot, but look, he'd be an improvement over Landale, he'd be an improvement over Saric, and he only makes $13 million. So hey, you'd ask for it, right? If you're James Jones, you'd say, I think I want Brook. But of course, he's a stud defender. Like, he is their anchor in the regular season and in the playoffs. He can just eat minutes protecting the rim and spacing the floor. He's been there forever. I think he's just too valuable. He's not going to be going out in a Jae Crowder trade. All right, so then you go to Bobby Portis, who also makes the right amount of money. He makes even less, almost exactly the same amount as Crowder. I think you might have to throw in something small if you're the Suns. But again, a little too valuable, right? He's their main bench scorer. He's their small ball big man to go alongside Giannis in some lineups, and they just re-signed him. So I don't think they're giving up Bobby Portis just to go get Jae Crowder, because then their team is back to square one a little bit, and now they have another need. They don't want to make their team worse. They want to make their team better, all right? And then, okay, so Pat Connaughton. I think he actually could be an option because he's not so vital to this team that you would be so stunned to lose him, but he's not eligible to be traded for a while because they just re-signed him this summer, whereas Portis was last summer. And there's not another logical player to pair him with to get up to Crowder's salary number, all right? Because Connaughton makes less than $6 million, Crowder makes about 10, so you're needing to find another player. There's not a lot. This Bucks roster is very top heavy. So that brings us to Grayson Allen. You probably knew where I was going. It's been because of that exercise. I do think it's worth doing for people who might not be familiar, but anyone who looks through the salary cap sheet for the Bucks gets very quickly to Grayson Allen because he makes a perfect amount of money. I believe it's about $8.5 million to get this deal done with Crowder's salary. And he's also expendable for the Bucks. But again, as all of these trades that we've talked about for a whole summer now with Jae Crowder have shown us, the same reason other guys are available is why the Suns don't necessarily want them. So Grayson Allen last season in the playoffs was a minus 10.6 per 100 possessions in the playoffs. So when Grayson Allen was out there, the Bucks got slaughtered, is basically the long and short of it. He actively held Milwaukee back. I don't think that's necessarily who he is as a player, but that was his biggest opportunity of his career to be in the playoffs, and he got it really handed to him, right? Like, he was, if you look, that's net rating. In the Boston series alone, just straight up plus minus, over the full 7 games, the Bucks got outscored by 48 points in Grayson Allen's minutes. He was starting a lot of those games in place of Chris Middleton, but even though he's a pretty reliable shooter, he's an average defender at best in the regular season. And then when you get to the playoffs, he's small, he has short arms, he can get overpowered, he's not going to be somebody who's going to help you much defensively. And then I think his lack of creation can be exploited in the playoffs on the offensive end. He's somebody where you can ignore him, right? You can let him shoot, or you can close out to him and try to make him do something else. Either way, he's not a dynamite shooter, and he's not very good at all as a playmaker. So you start to peel all those layers back, and it's like, what is he giving you in the playoffs? Like, what is he? What's his value? If he's not a knockdown shooter, he's a pretty good shooter, and he's not much of a defender, not much of a shot creator, etc. For the Suns, he would basically be, in my opinion, a little bit of a worse Landry Shamet because he's a little bit smaller. He can do a little bit less on offense. And defensively, I don't think the difference is that huge. So, obviously, I don't think he makes the Suns better, right? Is he playing over Shamet? Okay, maybe. Maybe he wins that battle, so to speak. But, like, the Suns improving the Landry Shamet spot in their rotation by 5% doesn't make them a better team, right? It makes one very specific role a tiny bit better. The holes in the bench will still be there. the lack of defensive versatility for some of the Suns lineups will still be there. Though Grayson Allen doesn't solve those things. The Bucks don't want to give up their key front court pieces in Lopez or Portis. The Suns probably don't want to or need to take on Grayson Allen. I don't think there's a deal here right now unless someone gets super creative with a 3-team trade that I'm not forecasting right now. I just do not see it. Last night's preseason game, I'm recording this on a Thursday, against the Lakers. Good things from the bench, including Shamet, who we'll talk about later on, but some questionable things with the starters in terms of building up Deandre Ayton. So we'll talk about the give and take that is unavoidable when it comes to Deandre Ayton. First, today's show, guys, brought to you by BetOnline, your number one source for all sports betting info, especially football, the rest of this year. Find the latest player developments, team matchups, news podcasts, and in-depth analysis and articles on every game you can find. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all sports wagering info with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. I told you guys already, pro football, college football, great futures for everything basketball. You have the baseball playoffs. I'm looking at the World Cup, all right? The USA is minus 115 to get out of their group. You can bet on England, who's in the US group, to lose in the group stage at plus 800, which might feel dicey, but look, crazier things have happened. England does not look good right now, and oh, would it feel good to be able to cash in on our rivals going down. Head to betonline.net, guys, to check it all out. That's betonline.net or their mobile app to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. Deandre Ayton was a little quieter in the second preseason game. He had 14 shots in game one compared to just 12 for Booker and Chris Paul. Minutes were basically the same in game two. Actually, everybody played a little bit more, including Ayton. All three of these players all played the same amount of minutes, so it's not about one guy playing more. And in game two, Ayton only had 12 shots, whereas Booker and Paul had 31 field goal attempts. So obviously, Ayton only making 3 of his 12 shots is a big reason why you would come away from that Lakers matchup feeling a little bit down on it, right? I'm not ignoring the results just to show the field goal attempts. I get it. Ayton did not make his shots. He had 2 turnovers in game 2 versus the first preseason game. He had 0 turnovers, so he was converting his opportunities a little bit better. And then free throws were basically non-existent, and that's always been the case. You even look at the best games you remember DeAndre Ayton playing, odds are he didn't shoot more than 5 free throws. In both of these preseason games, he had 1 free throw attempt in the first one, 2 free throw attempts in the second one. So you zero it down, you hone it in, mostly all of it comes back to shot attempts. So that's why I point that stat out. The reason this happened, big picture, I'm not going to break down the intricacies of like how, the Lakers preseason bench rotation guarded them this way. I'm not doing that. Big picture, any set run for DeAndre Ayton, I'm talking about a legitimate, get him the ball at the elbow, get him the ball in the post, something like that. It's a concerted choice, right? It means you're getting away from the pick and roll most likely, which is always going to be the default for both Booker and Paul. And you are probably slowing things down a little bit. You're going out of your comfort zone if you're getting DeAndre Ayton the ball. And that's for everybody. It's a departure from how the Suns have run their offense for 2 years now. And even in the pick and roll, which is a lot of what we saw against the Lakers, we saw Chris Paul feeling a little bit more comfortable and aggressive. I think some of it was he was going back and forth with Beverly, with Juan Toscano-Anderson, and he gets a chip on his shoulder for whatever reason because he's a lunatic, and he starts shooting more. So we saw that in the pick and roll. We also saw Booker getting a little bit more aggressive and testing out his pull-up 3 from the right wing, from the left wing, in the pick and roll, in transition, all of it. All of that stuff, if it is going to be coming in the pick and roll, that's going to mean less of those dump-offs, less of those drop passes where DeAndre Ayton can catch it in stride. pull his best Amari Stoudemire mask out and slam it in, or draw a foul, or lay it up, or whatever. So any growth, any reps that Ayton gets this season, apart from if somebody gets injured, if everybody's playing that we expect to play, it's going to require sacrifice and deliberate focus on him, on making him better, on giving him reps. And it's going to mean adjusting. It's going to mean doing things differently. And when you see a game like this Lakers game where it just felt like the usual stuff, that doesn't mean you're not going to win. The Suns are going to win a ton of games playing that way. They've already proven that. It doesn't mean, Ayton can even have big scoring nights that way. It's not even going to be something you necessarily can notice based on his point totals, right? Because he's shown us, just like the team has shown us they can win playing that way, he individually has proven he can put up points, he can get putbacks, he can get easy drop-off passes and dunks and everything else in the pick and roll. So it's not about the team not being better. It's about the future, right? And so how do you fix it? How do you solve that? I think the thing is going to be, it's a few things. So one number that I went back and looked at that I think is interesting here when you're talking about what's gonna make this commitment happen and make it more consistent so that it doesn't feel uncomfortable, because it is uncomfortable, but you don't want it to get in anybody's heads. You don't want it to come at the expense of comfort for other people. So you have to thread that needle. It's not easy. There's a reason that these championship teams evolve and change, and you have Draymond Green getting on everybody's nerves, or you have Scottie Pippen getting a lump on his shoulder, like a chip on his shoulder, right? Like, that's the hard part, but there are ways to do it, I think, with this Suns team. So the stat I was talking about, Deandre Ayton was assisted by Chris Paul 140 times last year. That was the most that anybody assisted Ayton by far. The next closest, you probably can guess, it was Devin Booker. So, okay, that's good. Both of those guys were feeding him, but not really, right? Booker had fewer than half of the amount of assists to Ayton that Paul had. So I told you it was 140 for Paul. It was 66 for Booker. So basically, the only guy who was consistently having a chemistry, looking for Ayton, getting him in position to score, was Chris Paul. The Suns also never play Ayton with the bench. I've talked about this a lot lately. Booker playmaking lineups, as we can tell from those assist totals, not Book at the point, that doesn't happen a lot, but lineups where Booker's the primary playmaker. So when Booker's playing with Payne, when Booker's playing with Shamet, when Booker is playing point guard, you're not going to, if it's only 66 across the whole entire season, that's obviously not a sustainable thing where it's like, oh, Booker and Ayton, they make each other better. I don't necessarily think that happens, right? So where do you go? Again, how do you thread that needle of it not always being this uncomfortable adjustment, but also making an adjustment? I think this is something I've talked about a lot. I talked about it with the bench. It doesn't even have to be all bench plus Ayton, but more time, more lineups, more minutes for lineups where Ayton is the featured guy. Maybe that's, him and Chris Paul and other bench players. So Booker's not in there, right? Maybe it is all bench. There's ways to do it, but times where everybody can kind of have their moment. And based on what lineup is out there, okay, we're going to go to these sets. This lineup's out there. We're going to play more natural pick and roll flow type of offense. Oh, maybe it's Payne with Ayton and some other shooters. We're going to push the pace a little bit. I think that can be a way to do it. The Suns are good about that already, but not a lot of those switches that get flipped based on which lineup is out there end up going back to Ayton. And I think that's going to be what you need to kind of, the mindset change that needs to happen. More design sets when Booker and Ayton are out there together for those two to be in actions playing off of one another. They have good lob chemistry. We've known that for a long time. When Booker gets trapped, when Booker gets the ball in position to drive downhill and have an easy pass to Ayton. We know that chemistry is somewhat there, but put those two guys in actions more often together, whether that is pick and roll, whether that's some, dribble handoff stuff, whether that's, there's different things you can do, but that feels simple. That feels like something that we've seen. It's just a matter of turning the knob up on it, and I think it could help. And then, look, it's Deandre Ayton. He was the guy just 2 weeks ago who everybody was panicking about in terms of his happiness, and I think that's not going away. I think with him in general for his whole career, but especially after the way Game 7 happened, the way the contract thing played out, his attitude, his relationship with his teammates and his coach, those things are going to have to continue to be monitored. They're not done, and that does affect how committed a player is individually to doing the things he needs to do. That affects how his teammates view the sacrifice that they might want to make or not want to make him better. From the moment the Suns matched this year, the season was always going to be about sacrifice and adjustment when it came to making Ayton better, to developing him, to having him reach his potential. And it has to happen. You have to do that for the chemistry to be at its best, to empower Ayton, make him feel comfortable and happy, and also to mix up the offense come playoff time, because we know that needs to happen. The Suns have lost 2 straight series between the Mavericks and the Bucks because they didn't have the offensive juice when they needed it. So all of that has to happen, but it's going to be the byproduct of everybody committing to it. It's hard to say if it will happen. It's hard to say right now that it all will happen, but it has to. Landry Shamet, 21 points, 5 made 3-pointers in that Lakers win. How did he do it, and can that be the solution to the Suns' bench problems? We'll get into that more. First, one more quick break. So, Landry Shamet, again, 21 points, 5 made threes. How did he do it? Mostly the two-man game with Jock Landale. I think one of the things I haven't mentioned, I did a breakdown of Jock's game on the show earlier in the week. I have commented on him after both of these preseason games in terms of his performance in those games specifically. What I haven't mentioned is he's also a really good screener. So when he can get a body on Landry's defender or whoever it is in some of that dribble handoff stuff, he's going to smack that defender out of rhythm. And so Landry was able to get open quite a bit with that. Plus, he demonstrated some pretty nice footwork, getting to the step back 3, catching the ball and gathering himself and launching kind of all in one motion. He's very good at that, but it looked especially good last night. He had a couple of catch and shoot looks with the starters. And then obviously, aside from the X's and O's or how his shots came, it's always just good to be confident and aggressive. He looked for his own shot. Honestly, I think he could have even taken a few more. It took really until the second half for him to get the wind behind his sails and start to bomb away. There were a couple early in the game with Dario in the lineup and others that he passed up. The other thing that got some attention in terms of how Landry did it, what worked for him against the Lakers, was playing point guard. He was the nominal point guard, sort of the smallest guy on the floor in a lot of his minutes in that game. But I don't think it's sustainable, okay? It was mostly because Cam Payne got hurt. I don't think Monty fully trusts Dwayne Washington yet, so he preferred clearly to get Shamet out there at point and get some reps that way versus just shoving Washington out there when he doesn't feel like Washington is ready for whatever reason. I think mostly defense. Landry did play point guard in college, but that was with other ball handlers. He played some point in 2019-20 with the Clippers, and actually the Clippers outscored opponents by almost 13 points per 100 possessions in a pretty big sample size when Shamet was playing point. But again, like his Wichita State days, those were mostly lineups with other ball handlers. A lot of them were one, if not both, of Kawhi and PG out there with him. And those guys are effectively going to be the point guard of whatever lineup they're in because they're going to be the guys who are taking most of the shots, creating most of the shots. So again, similar where Shamet's like technically the smallest guy on the floor, but that's just more so in name only. It's not like he's initiating every time down the floor, dribbling the ball up, playing a traditional point guard. So from a Suns standpoint, I think the best scenario positionally or lineup-wise might be more Shamet and Booker minutes. Last season, those lineups outscored teams by 4.1 per 100 points per 100 possessions, with Shamet and Booker and Shamet at point and Booker at the 2 specifically, because there were some other lineups with other guards in there that's not what I'm including, but they didn't do a ton of that, but more of it might work, and it seemed to work okay last season. So the way he succeeded against the Lakers, combined with the lineup stuff there, means to me he still needs to be out there with another creator. I don't think he showed us anything against the Lakers despite scoring well that makes me believe he's solving these bench scoring problems by himself. His scoring can be part of a solution, but at his best, he's a versatile lineup piece. He's a second option. He's a floor spacer for other offensive engines. He's not somebody who's going to drive offense for a whole team when he's on the floor. Also, you just look at the other players out there right now, and it's because the Suns didn't do a whole lot of changing of their roster. We have evidence. Payne plus Shamet and no starters lineups last year. So no Payne Shamet Paul or Payne Shamet Booker, but those two and no starters, they basically were even. They didn't get outscored. They didn't outscore the opponent. It was basically +0 per 100 possessions. They just stayed afloat. And right now, that's probably the best the Suns bench can ask for. But point being, that's your best creator to play alongside Shamet off the bench. And we know Payne has just not been up to that task. So again, it's not the pleasant answer to hear, but everything points back to the Suns needing an offensive upgrade on the bench. With Payne playing that badly for over a year now and no one else stepping up, and guys like Shamet they are off-ball players. They are complementary players. They're not the answer here. They need something. The Suns need something else. That's just the reality that they're in. That'll close out the week for us, guys. Back Monday with more thoughts. I think we're going to eventually start the series I've been wanting to do, which is 7 questions or less to answer for the Phoenix Suns season. We'll start that soon. We'll have game recaps for Monday and Wednesday's preseason games. Keep it right here. Hit subscribe, hit follow. Make sure you do not miss a single show. And in the meantime, make Locked On NBA your second listen to catch our season preview series over on that feed, featuring roundtables that I will be on, that every Locked On team host will be talking on, to get you a clear breakdown of every team in the entire NBA. So hit that show, second listen, and I'll talk to you guys Monday.